friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I came here to bury Caesar, not to praise him. What? No, what's up, guys? I'll be starting each episode with that quote from Julius Caesar. That's tight. This week, this is episode 4. We are on a roll, getting mad downloads. Thank you guys so much Twitter love, so much Facebook love. Please do me a favor. This week, I have an assignment for you. This is your homework. Please tell 5 friends who might be into the podcast that it exists, and please leave a comment or a review. Then, like I said, even if you hate it, just having that interaction on the iTunes or whatever app or site you listen to podcasts on would be super, super great. I want to give a shout out to this week. We got some new Patreon supporters. Shout out to Sage, Seth, and Lorian for their donations. In case you didn't know, I'm on Patreon, and every few weeks I put out a new song. I'm currently in the middle of my Chronicles of Narnia EP, and I'm doing one song every 2 weeks about each of C.S. Lewis's Narnia Chronicles. So we started, of course, with The Magician's Nephew. Tomorrow I'm dropping the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe song, and I'm doing all 7 songs. So that EP is exclusively for Patreon. But enough about me. Let's talk about part 2 of this week's awesome guest, Schäffer the Darklord. Now, this week we kind of talk about our touring lives together and our philosophies about being on the road. He and I are going on the road with MC Frontalot and Mega Ran most of October. So come see us if you want to. We would love it. nerdcoretour.com. And if you listen to the podcast, I have a code word for you, okay? I want you to say #StealingFire. If you say that to me at the merch booth, #StealingFire, you'll get like a drawing, or maybe I'll give you a free CD. I can't promise anything, but that's like our code. Tom Green did something similar on his podcast, so I stole that idea from him. But before we start the podcast this week, I wanted to announce at the end of the show. Now, if you follow me on Twitter and Facebook, I kind of gave a hint about this. At the end of the show, we have an amazing, exciting world premiere. And this is the world premiere of a indie hip hop supergroup called the Department of Darkness. Ooh, I'll let that sink in. If you're driving, I hope you just didn't run off the road just now, or if you're running, I hope you didn't fall over. You know, some people jog while they listen to the podcast. The Department of Darkness. Now, this group consists of Vince Vandal, who did a remix of one of my songs a while ago, my song with Adam Warrock, Vince Vandal, and Schäffer the Darklord. Their debut self-titled album will drop on Bandcamp Monday, October 1st, and then it's going to hit iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, whatever, right after, and a vinyl 12-inch is coming out by the end of the year. This song is called World on Fire, and it's about, well, it's inspired by Far Cry 5. So some of you might have played this game, and basically it's the story of this religious zealot who gets all these people together and creates kind of this cult in the wilderness. And so in the song, Schäffer plays like the crazed, and I'm getting chills, dog, just talking about it. He plays the crazed leader, and this hook is like an old religious gospel spiritual that they turn into the chorus of the song, which is like some of their best work. He's explaining why he started the cult, and I talk about why I joined his cult. And I'm an English teacher who loses his tenure because he teaches Huck Finn, and one of the millennial students doesn't appreciate the language in Huck Finn. And that book has had some problematic responses, and I think teachers can lose, professors sometimes lose their position when they say something controversial. So it's kind of the story of this English professor who gets washed up in this cult and their lives together. So it's just like, it's a really cool song. It's like my favorite collab I've done in a very long time. So October 1st, peep the Department of Darkness, and we'll talk more about that later probably, but this is part 2 of my interview with Schäffer the Darklord. Stay to the end because you're going to hear this brand new song, which you literally can't hear anyone anywhere else except on the MC Lars podcast. Okay, so without much further ado, let's cue the intro music and let's get chatting with Schäffer the Darklord. So speaking of your origins, and speaking of people who start out good and become evil, then become good again, what was like? You grew up in Iowa?
Yeah, rural Iowa.
And what was that like? Like, what was it? What was the town like? And what was your childhood like?
It was like Mayberry. It really was. It was a town of 1,800 people, farming community. Everybody who lived in that town, they either lived on a farm or their family had a farm, except for me. A very small town. Everybody knows everybody. No stoplights. Like Mayberry.
Oh, wow.
Like very Andy Griffith.
It was like McDonald's or
No. The closest McDonald's was 20 miles away. And as a kid, going with my mom to that town 20 miles away, that was only 5,000 people. That was like going to the city as a little kid, because they had a McDonald's, they had a Kmart. Like they had things that we didn't have there. We had these, like little mom and pop shops, and there would be tractors driving on Main Street, our Main Street, which was, 2 blocks long.
Yeah.
So I realized very early that like something terrible had happened, that the cosmos had made a terrible mistake, and that I was, I've heard the expression over the years, people saying, "Oh, I was born too late. I would have been so much better in the 40s or the 50s." That was a generation that a time that I recognize, that I identify with aesthetically. And I just always felt I was born in the wrong place. I knew when I was a little kid, I mean, even before I got to, facing like the bullying of high school, even just as a little kid, all I knew was that one day I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to a city, and I'm going to do things. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to go do stuff. So I grew up this little weirdo shut-in kid who wasn't like involved in sports and didn't know anything about farming or the outdoors, and didn't like camping. And I liked reading, and I was, became a movie buff, and I was like this gifted nerdy kid who was like smaller than all my classmates. It's just a miracle that I survived, because I just stuck out like such a sore thumb there.
And were you there all the way through high school?
All the way through high school, yeah.
Wow. And how big was your graduating class?
I think it was 55 people.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So was that where you kind of like discovered Twin Peaks and David Lynch and
Sure.
stuff?
Twin Peaks. Yeah. I watched Twin Peaks when it aired on television with my mom. Like in high school, I saw all of it and just absolutely loved it.
So there were these flashes of like things in the mainstream that were like these genius kind of outliers creating content or creating art, right?
Right.
And do you have early memories of hip hop from that period?
I have a very specific one. The kind that is so specific that if I were ever in a position where there were to be like a biopic made about my life, this is the kind of thing that would play before the credits as a flashback in a sepia tone. It's so distinct. It's 1986.
Okay.
And cable had just made it to my small town like a couple of years before.
Right.
And MTV was new. So maybe it was actually more like 85. MTV hadn't even been on the air very long. We'd only had it for a couple of years, and I was obsessed. I was just watch MTV, just watch music videos all day long. And at that time, it was 20 videos that would just repeat all day, and I just watch them all day long.
Yeah.
I had this moment where I was watching MTV, and I'd been like in another room, and I came in, and there was one of the VJs was making this announcement that they were going to have a world premiere video, the new video from the Beastie Boys. And at this point, I'd seen Fight for Your Right to Party had already been on the air, and I'd seen it and thought it was great. But this was the world premiere of their second single, No Sleep Till Brooklyn. The one where they're like, they're like getting kicked out of a club, and they're trying to convince the manager that they're the band, and they like have a record, and he's like, "What is this?" And they're like in wigs, and they have electric guitars, and they're on stage, and there's a guy playing a guitar in a suit of armor. So anyway, this music video plays, and I walked into the living room. As I remember, I can see myself in this room. I walk in, and they're announcing that there's another music video from this group, the Beastie Boys. That first one, Fight for Your Right, never really felt like a rap song. It felt like a rock and roll song.
Sure, yeah.
No Sleep Till Brooklyn starts playing. I stand there, just motionless, just frozen in space. And I watched this whole thing like slack-jawed, silently, by myself. And I think I was the only one home. And I just stared at this whole thing. These goofy white guys with electric guitars and all of these dumb jokes and like suits of armor, and there's like an amp exploding, and they're rapping and they're really tough, and they're all funny, and they're all having so much fun, and like just a part of my brain went online. Like something changed. There was my life before that moment, and then after.
Right.
And it just never stopped after that. So I feel like, I of course, small town, early mid 80s, like I hadn't been exposed to any, hip hop unless it had been on MTV.
Sure.
And at that point there hadn't been a lot. This is before Yo MTV Raps. This is before Fresh Prince and Jazzy Jeff.
Like most kids of that era, that was a moment. And when MTV started playing those early Def Jam artists.
Yeah.
Then you went out and bought License to Ill? Or,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I recorded a cassette copy from my friend Jake Laughlin, and then
Shout out to Jake.
Yeah, played it until it broke, and then bought the copy of it and probably played that one until it broke.
So you could probably recite that record pretty much.
Oh yeah, I could probably all of their records.
That's tight.
That definitely made me aware of hip hop and made me want to just know as much of it as I could. And it was, really difficult then. So I had to wait for
you had to search for it.
Yeah, there wasn't radio. There wasn't hip hop radio in rural Iowa, and there wasn't our local grocery store wasn't getting hip hop magazines, and there was no access to.
That's interesting. So it was this huge mainstream moment that like hit your world, and then you went out and saw it and decided to become a student really of the culture, huh?
Yeah, kind of. I was just I just wanted as much of it as I could get.
So after Beastie Boys, what was next for you?
Well, and then Run DMC. I remember there was a really important moment was getting Slick Rick's first record at a one of those, I don't remember what they were called now, but one of those record stores they would have in the malls.
Oh yeah.
I got one of those, and you buy like a cassette tape, and it was in like this long plastic case so they wouldn't rip it off.
Yeah.
Getting that one, and then that blew my mind.
How'd you discover him?
It was seriously, there was a tiny little section called rap.
Yeah.
And he was on the cover and he had an eye patch on. And I was like, that looks cool.
Yeah.
His name's Slick Rick. It rhymes. He looks like, this looks all right. This guy's like, it started immediately responding to the things that I ended up using later. I was like, this guy is wearing a costume. And he looks,
right. That's
and he looks, there's something interesting about this. And
a storyteller.
Yeah. But then I didn't know that until I got home and started listening.
So you hadn't heard, you just, the image enough sold you on. Uh-huh. And when did you start to find you had other friends who liked hip hop too? Or
yeah, I had a couple other classmates, but they were still, they had as much access as I did. So we would talk about the videos that we would see. I remember a big moment being, it would have been a couple of years later, but seeing, again, before Yo MTV Raps, but just really late at night, they were kind of like playing weird stuff. And I saw the video for Kool Moe Dee's Wild Wild West.
Oh, yeah.
That was like a big moment, too. I remember having to call my friend, the next day and being like, did you see this? And he hadn't, but I had like a little Radio Shack tape recorder.
That I would just
tape the audio off the TV. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, what was your first rhyme you wrote, I guess? When did you start writing lyrics?
I think probably in 6th or 7th grade, there was a writing assignment for an English class. And I wrote a song about, I wrote a poem. We were supposed to write poems, but I wrote a poem about Halloween, about going trick-or-treating and like my town being taken over by monsters. They're like all the monsters from horror movies. Surely a little bit influenced.
That.
I feel like, yeah, totally. Yeah. I feel like before that, I can't remember if that 7-inch of DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince's Nightmare on My Street. I can't remember if that was before or after. I feel like my thing came after and it was kind of influenced by that. But yeah, so I wrote this thing and it was, I wrote it out in 4-bar stanzas, and there was, for the most part, pretty consistent like meter and rhythm throughout the whole thing. I wrote it intending it to be like a Run DMC song, and then read it in front of the class, and I
got an A.
Oh yeah, it was good. It was good work. That was like the first thing that was really a rhyme. And I know that when I was reading it, I was like kind of nodding my head because in my head there was a drum beat. But
do you remember it?
No. Yeah. All I remember is like the last lines. Like I go and I have this terrible Halloween, and at the end I'm like, and at the end it's like, yeah. And then, gosh, I don't even remember the premise of it now, because at the end it says that Halloween is the next day. But anyway, maybe it was a dream, which means I totally ripped it off from the Fresh Prince. But it was like the last line is, tomorrow's Halloween, for treats we'll all roam. Tomorrow's Halloween, I think I'll stay home, because I was too scared because we're too many
That's
monsters.
Great, man. Yeah. That's cool.
But that was like, 6th or 7th grade. And that was that would have been the first thing that I wrote be considered a rhyme.
So, all right. So we talked a little about your exposure to hip hop. We talked a little bit about your transition from metal and punk into rap. I want to talk about then, like, so we did the middle, your early years, and I want to talk about like how what was your exposure then to nerdcore as a genre, and like What was it like when you first started doing these long tours? Because I know, like, you're one of the original guys, and you've definitely toured a lot. Like, what was that like? When did you first hear that it was a thing, and when did people start associating you with Frontalot and Chris and all those guys?
I'd heard Chris's stuff because somebody had, recommended it, years before, but I hadn't heard of nerdcore as a genre. After I moved to New York, and I was then in a suit and doing solo stuff, my old friend from Iowa, Cool Z, and I started doing tours around the country, and we were doing it from a very punk rock DIY aspect.
You like booked them yourselves?
Booked them ourselves by we were mailing press kits to the clubs.
That's awesome.
Sometimes we could contact people by email, but we were still putting together CDRs and sending them in the mail and then calling them on Tuesday between 3 and 4 p.m., which was when the booker was in or whatever, and doing that kind of crap.
Yeah.
But we were doing it the way that my bands had booked tours, because that's all that I had known how to do. You get a copy of Maximum Rock and Roll's Book Your Own Life, and then these are the clubs, these are the contact people, and all ages venues and whatever. So we were going out there and we were booking these 3 or 4 week tours to nobody, playing to nobody, making no money. But in our head, we were like, well, this is how you do it. You go, and then you come back in a couple months, and then maybe that one person who was there last time will bring 2 people.
Sure.
This is before really using the internet to build an audience. So we were going out there kind of hard. And
that kind of Black Flag model.
Yeah.
Where you have to carve out the routing yourself with the relationships.
Yep. And just playing on whatever bill they would squeeze us onto.
How old were you at this point?
Early 30s. I was probably around 30 is when I think Cool Z and I were starting to do these tours. So it's getting kind of a late start on it.
That's amazing that you had that much belief in yourselves and put in the work.
Yeah, I started once I started getting a little bit of attention from my MySpace page or whatever, I started feeling like I could maybe do this. I could maybe get an audience. I could maybe connect with some people. So we just started doing it the only way we knew how, which was this going at it slowly and going back to Indianapolis 6 months later and hoping that we had 10 people.
Sure.
And that eventually it's going to kind of pay off. During this time, we had done that show in Boston.
You and I had.
You and I and Damien had done that show, and it was amazing.
Was Optimus Prime on the show or not?
No.
Okay.
No.
They joined that tour later, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
I never got to perform with or meet Optimus Prime.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, they should reunite.
Familiar with their stuff, but never met him.
Wow.
So in the following year, in 2007, I think because of that experience, Damien had done one of his first tours, probably right after they had made that documentary. So it was one of his early ones. And he brought me along as a support act because we'd gotten along at that show.
Oh, wow.
So doing that tour, I met some nerdcore people along the way, met MC Hawking.
How long was that tour, you think?
I don't know, maybe 3 weeks. It made it from
pretty long.
It made it from New York to California.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then there were audiences along the way because he'd had this he early on knew how to build this internet buzz and people knew about him. So people were coming to the shows and they were all excited and I was getting a lot of great feedback. And then it was basically the next year was that first Nerdapalooza when it was in a restaurant in Orlando. Wow. And somebody from that had contacted me and said, hey, we'd like you to come be a part of this. It's a nerdcore hip hop show. And I'm like, well, I'm not nerdcore hip hop. My songs are about Satan and having sex with clones of myself and cats. I don't really rap about computers and video games.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're one of us. And I was like, is it because I'm white and I got glasses? Is that really what it is? No, but I realized, there's something inherently nerdy about the passion I put into everything that I've done. And that even though in my head I was like, I don't rap about Tetris, I'm still a big nerd. So they invited me down to that thing.
And who else was there? Because I don't know if I don't think I was at the first one.
You weren't at that one, but that's where I met Raheem. That's where I met Zealous One. That's where I met Whitey. I met a lot of people that day.
2007? 2008. And was it okay? So was that a restaurant?
Yeah.
And Chozo put that together.
Yeah. He was involved in that. Yeah.
So Chozo, for those of you a lot of you probably know who he is, but he's a promoter from Orlando who was one of the people who helped start the Nerdapalooza. And then how many of before the festival ended, how many of those did you play?
I played it every year from 2008 through the last one, which was 2013.
Consecutively?
Every year, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What were some of your favorite years playing that?
They were all so much fun. 2012 was my favorite.
Yeah.
That was definitely my favorite. That's the one where they split it up into two. Instead of having it in like a convention center or a hotel, they had it in
the Beecham and
the Beecham and the Social. And that year was amazing.
And I think I was there just like as a fan that year. Oh, I played Chozo's After Party.
Oh yeah,
2012.
Right.
And I remember the Proto Men played.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen them. I was like, wow. And I think the interesting thing about that festival is like, speaking of genres coming together, it kind of became more of a rock festival later in the year.
Yeah, there was a lot more. There became more and more video game music.
Yeah,
that became a thing. There were definitely more bands, and it was a lot of like video game inspired music, which is fine. But there became fewer and fewer hip hop acts each year.
Did you ever play PAX?
No, I've never played PAX.
But not yet, at least.
Not.
Okay, so
and I forgot actually to back up. Wait, one thing. I forgot that there was a step before the Frontalot tour and the first Nerdapalooza, and that was the Rhyme Torrents message board. Oh, that was how I became involved in nerdcore, or how I became aware of nerdcore as a genre. That sometime after that 2006 show at TT and the Bears, and sometime before I went on tour with Frontalot in fall of 2007,
you're up on there.
I like had found my name like on an online search because there was this group called Rhyme Torrents, which is like the early organization of nerdcore where people were sharing their music online and meeting one another, where I got listed on something because somebody had seen one of these shows that I did with Cool T where there was 10 people there and was like, oh, I saw this guy Schäffer the Darklord, he's part of it. And I remember kind of showing up being like, oh, people are talking about me somewhere, and then I was like, oh, it's nerd rap. That's not what I do. That was how it happened.
Wait, was it a forum or were they uploaded your MP3s?
No, it was a forum. They were just talking about it. Like they mentioned it. But then I signed up and I joined, and then I was like able to share some music, and I did like one of their early compilations. But then I was like, that was the first time I kind of found community. I had like kind of crafted myself as an outsider to like a metal and punk rock audience. And now there were a bunch of people saying like, no, you're a nerd rapper. You're part of this nerd rap crew.
It's like the Sarlacc pit. You can't escape it. It pulls you down into it.
Yeah. They basically said like, hey, we know who you are. You're one of us. And I was like, no, I'm not. And they're like, yes, you are.
And they're like, and even, no matter how much you say, no, you're not, they're like, well, if you accept it, we'll have people care about you. You'll make money. They'll come see you. And it's going to be a small group, but it's going to be a loyal audience.
Yeah. I did the thing too. Like I got so excited at first because I was like, there's this secret community, and they know about what I do, and they're excited about what I do. So I wrote a couple of really pandery songs.
Sure.
Because I was
as
like,
we all did.
Yeah. I was like, this nerd rap scene likes me, so here's a song with a whole bunch of nerd references.
So did they react well to it? Or no?
Yeah, those songs were really well liked, but I only did that for a little while. And I guess, I mean, I know there's still elements of my act that are really nerdy, and there are references at times, but that was the stuff that I did that was the most shamelessly pandering, of saying like, here's a song about why I love nerdy women. Here's a whole bunch of references, things, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Where I was just straight up saying, thanks for inviting me to the party. Is there anything I can bring?
Yeah, sure. You have that song where this is not quite related, but where you're like giving props to the sound man. It's like a similar thing. You've always been very gracious. Like that's another example. You're a great guest.
That was kind of manipulative. I used to do that. I wrote that song just as a thing to do to sound checks. So to get a sound guy on my side.
So that he or she would make the sound.
They'd be like, oh my God, somebody wrote a song about we did with all the references, because I had been a sound guy before.
Yeah.
And I was like, these are all the things that you have to put up with. And then, they'd give me a fist bump after sound check. And
then you don't play it.
Set.
Yeah.
I don't do it for the show, no. But
so there are all these, the thing that's interesting to me is there are all these tangential indie rap and underground movements that kind of were nerdcore adjacent, but never like were considered part of that scene. And like some of it, like Grand Buffet, you remember them?
Oh yeah. I did a show with, before I knew nerdcore, I did a show, like one of the first big shows I got booked on in San Francisco as a solo act was with Grand Buffet. They were touring, and I got
Were they headlining?
They were headlining, and I was their local opener.
Oh, that's awesome! I can't believe I wasn't at that show.
I loved it. They were. I don't remember which record they were touring for, but it was the one with candy bars on it.
So Sparkle Classic.
Yes.
So wait. So tell our listeners a little bit about Grand Buffet for some of the people who might not be hip to them.
They are definitely they're this two-man indie rap group from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And they were absolutely like proto nerdcore. And if they stopped making music, then the nerdcore audience could just say, yes, these guys were nerdcore because they're not here to defend that now.
They kind of slowed down, I guess, recently.
Yeah. And I stayed in contact with them for a while because it had been such a great show, and I became a fan. Like I got all the music at the show, and I kept listening to them, and I loved them. And I was like, I want to play with you again, but I never did again. I only got that one show with them.
Wow.
Years later, I was on a delayed flight, and I ran into them in a restaurant bar and got to hang out with them for
just
a while.
randomly.
Yeah.
And they were touring.
Yeah,
that's cool. What about? Did you ever cross paths with any of the Anticon collective?
No. I know. I listened to a lot of that stuff, but I didn't really like personally know any of them.
Yeah. But they were all coming up in the Bay at a similar era.
Isn't that like that whole crew that like spawned the genre name backpack rap?
Basically, that's them.
Yeah.
And they were kind of like, they were competitive with LP and Company Flow and Def Jux and like Sage Francis and a lot of that stuff. They helped launch that stuff.
I loved a lot of that stuff, and I never had any connection to them.
Have you ever met Sage?
No.
Did you listen to him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't in a long time, but I had like a really pretty heavily concentrated Sage Francis period.
Yeah. As we all did.
Yeah.
I think that
probably around your Aesop Rock period.
Oh yeah. Aesop Rock, Company Flow, Cannibal Ox.
Oh, I played with Cannibal Ox, but not as me. I played with them in one of my rock bands.
Wow.
Played a show with Cannibal Ox when I was drumming in a rock band.
That's cool.
Yeah.
In the Bay or here?
In the Bay.
Yeah. That's cool, man. So what, like these days, what are some things you've learned that have helped you? First of all, like you're one of my most prolific friends, and like your quality is all super high, and like it's like it really inspires me to hang out with you and listen to your new records, because it's like sometimes you see artists and the fire kind of goes out, and I've never seen that with you, and I don't ever imagine seeing that. And like, what are some things you've learned like as an artist? And also I noticed you're just really good with your business. Like you always, every project you do, you do it effectively. And like, what have you learned since then, and coming out of nerdcore and growing beyond it, but like having your start in there, I guess, as a touring artist? I really feel that I think that the weakest part of what I do is I don't think I'm very good at business. And I feel that the things that I have learned about being the most effective in the business end of this are things that I've picked up from you and Raheem and Damien. Like that I've kind of looked to you guys for sort of cues on this, because that's always been kind of my weakest part. Like, I don't know. I just, there's still this part of me that's just like, man, I just want to make music. But connect with people. You do it here, you record on your own, you make a lot of your own beats. Like your videos are all really well produced. And I don't know, I feel like I honestly learned from you a lot, and how you kind of like, my method has always been like, do a crowdfunding, raise a bunch of money, put a bunch of money into like the best people I can get, and no disrespect to them, like I think all the people I've hired have done great, but like I think there are more economic ways to do stuff that's just as good.
Yeah, I do all of my as a way to both save money and to maintain some quality control. I do all of my own vocal recording at home. I built my own kind of makeshift vocal isolation booth so that I can record all of my vocals at home and edit all of them and prepare them for mixing here without having to pay for studio time. That saves a lot of money. That way then once I prep out tracks into stems, I'm only paying somebody to mix. That's saved me a lot of money.
And was that always kind of your approach, or did you ever sit down and like rent studio time?
Oh, I rented studio time, and I spent my time like kind of leaning over the shoulder of somebody being like, yeah, that take was good. And me saying like, I'd like to kind of do a few and hear them back to back, and they'd be resentful, but then at the same time they wouldn't be, because I'm just adding time onto this project and spending more money.
Yeah.
But they engineers don't really like it when you stand over their shoulders and you're like, all right, we're going to take a couple of words from this take and we're going to put them into that take. That never flew very well.
Because they're always like, either like they have their own creative vision, or they're like, it's okay, it sounds fine.
Yeah, they don't want somebody to come in to be like, so you're an armchair amateur audio engineer and you're going to come into my studio that you just hired to tell me how to do this
and backseat drive the session.
Exactly. I was such a backseat driver, and I feel like both in saving money, just having the ability to record and edit and comp my own vocal tracks at home has given me time to like take time and explore different recording techniques and different strategies for recording songs. Like, I used to go in and be like, I'm not going to record a song until I have 3 finished verses and 2 hooks, and like it's going to be finished, written beginning to end, that I've practiced, and it's going to be done, and I'm going to record it really well that first time, and that's it. And I don't do that anymore. I demo the songs as I'm writing them. I will, if I have like a new song in mind and I write a hook, I will record that one hook and bounce it down and listen to it a few times, and I'll go back in and re-record the hook, and I'll do that verse to verse, and I'll get the whole thing tracked out. And then I'll go back, and now I've been able to do it a bunch of times and listen to it. I know what part works, which parts work, and I can record the final version of the vocals that now don't sound like I'm reading it off a page, but sounds like I know it and I feel it and I believe it.
So you kind of you take like a day or two and let it breathe, the demos breathe.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time recording stuff. The last few records I put out, any song that you hear on any of them will represent basically the third pass at vocals.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'll record one sloppy. I won't set up the booth. I'll just do it in the room and demo it. And then as I'm like kind of making notes and going back and doing rewrites, and I'll go into the booth and I'll record them verse by verse and like make kind of a rough mix of that and listen to it. But yeah, once it's all done, then I go and I do like, this is the day. And then I'll need like 4 hours to set aside. Like, this is the day I record final vocals for this track.
So you do 4 hours on one song?
I have.
Yeah. Do you comp them or do you do So,
I'll do multiple takes of each line by line, and then I will take the best takes. And
so Damien, I guess, is like that too.
I kind of learned that from Damien from working with him. I remember the first time I recorded a song with Damien, I left there exhausted and irritated, because I'm like,
same.
God, there's so much work. Like, I could do this at home. I could just crank this out. And now, like, why do I have to do so many takes? And
was he like directing you, like try again?
Yeah, give me another one, but like,
that's kind of his talent.
Give me an ascend at the end, or give me a descend at the end. And I was like getting exhausted. It was hard to maintain energy. And then the results are it. Like, the results speak for themselves. Like,
well, me as a fan of your work, I noticed this big jump between like when you did Manslaughterer and the record before that. Like, that was like a big jump and a big shift in quality, I felt like.
That is that transition between those two records is when I first built my own vocal isolation booth.
And you started to do it yourself.
Yeah.
What was the record before again?
Mark of the Beast.
Right.
The vocals on that are half recorded in studio and half recorded like with some little like kind of crappy USB mic that I had, that I was recording just in an open room and recording really self-consciously because I was nervous about my next door neighbors hearing me. So all of my delivery is really gated, because I'd be like, I mean, I feel this song, but like, it's not like being on stage where I have this unbridled energy. It's like, I worry that my neighbors are going to hear me. Now I'm self-conscious because I probably sound stupid.
Do you think they did?
They might have, but so building the booth
cares,
was
right?
both. Yeah. Well, at the time I did, but I've learned to not. But yeah, so being able to record at home was both a way to be able to record with by myself, so that I could have control over editing, and also, sort of no distractions, and I could go at everything as hard, give it the kind of energy that I felt the songs deserved without being self-conscious.
And that's kind of like, I remember I learned that kind of early on, that working with different people versus just being by yourself, if you can capture your audio and like get a best performance and be on your own time, you really get the best results. Or having like someone who you trust who's manning the recording, but it's just doing the technical side, and then you're able to like facilitate the creative side yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's like I remember for me, like especially like mid-era, I would be very specific about the grammar. I'd be like, oh, I'd say a line. I'd be like, oh, I use slang there. Or I use the wrong pronoun. And then producers would get mad. I'd be like, let me punch that because I want to say his or them or were instead of was. And and they were like, no, it's good. And we'd get in these heated grammar fights. And I don't know. That's not worth the stress because it's like art to me is this constant self-discovery and self-sustaining thing. And it seems like that is after all these years, it's what I finally appreciate and love about hip hop and what I've come to like appreciate with what's great about nerdcore, you know?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. And I feel the thing that keeps me making music now and the reason why I keep doing it is because I have learned, like, it's great to make music for an audience and it's great to have an audience appreciate it. But there's also, there's something really cathartic and therapeutic that I've gotten from just the process of making songs and telling a story and getting it out there. And
playing it for an audience.
I don't do everything so much explicitly for an audience anymore. I mean, they're always in mind, but I won't put the energy into recording anything unless I believe in it now. I won't do something just like kind of going back and saying like I wrote some kind of pandery songs. I'm not going to write a song just because I'm like, this is the kind of thing that my audience would like to hear.
Yeah.
I will release a thing that they might not want to hear if I like believe in it. And I'm like, this song is important for me to put out. And that song, or likewise, if I spend a bunch of energy on a song that I think is going to be, if I spend weeks working on a song and at the end, I'm not happy with it, I'm not going to release it just because, well, I got to pad out this record. And also because I already put all this work into it. I got to get something out of it. Sometimes I'll be like, it just didn't work.
That's great.
I learned lessons from the experience, but I don't have to show my work all the time. I don't have to like a math problem. They don't all have to see it just because I don't have to release it just because I did it.
My friend Sean, who's a great director, who's done a lot of my videos, told me this expression is called "kill your babies." It's like sometimes like you have to edit the stuff out and not release stuff that you really thought was good, but if it's just not perfect. And I think that's when, like, being in 2018, we're in this culture where it's all about content creation, constantly putting stuff out. And like you and I are kind of like old school dudes who are like, we want to craft these beautiful records that people will discover and hit in a certain moment. And like, but that's the culture shifted. And I think it's like this weird balance, huh?
It's a bunch of people in the same small pool of artists that are all competing for the same short attention span. And you just like, the message that we keep being told is like, you gotta stay connected to them or they're gonna lose interest or they're gonna forget about you. Like, then let them.
Yeah, right. And I think like with the nerdcore stuff, it's those are the kind people who stuck around, who cared enough, right?
Yeah.
The completists, the collectors. Like you have so many graphic novels here. I'm looking at your awesome media collection. It's like to have this be part of this canon is really an incredible privilege, you know.
Yeah.
Even if it's like hit or miss, you know. Mm-hmm. I think you have on Sick Passenger, you have this skit where the therapist asks you why you create, and what is the thing you say?
Oh my gosh,
that struck me. It's very funny.
I don't even.
You're like, yeah.
I don't actually remember.
But you remember this moment, right?
Kind of, yeah. That I.
The darker side of like not for the art, but for like everything that comes from it, attention, gratification.
Oh, right. What do you get from doing it?
Yeah.
I get all of these things that all of these kind of like validating like reinforcements
that are external to the art.
They aren't about the art. That it makes it more of like it kind of questions the motive because it looks like, is this a cause and effect thing? Like, are you putting out songs because you want people to like you, or are you rewarding the people that like you by giving them songs that you give a shit about?
And I think the latter is the way to be sustainable.
Yeah.
I think something else, like I just wanted to touch on that I love about your work and I love about your social media presence is that you're very quick to call people out for not being like kind or conscious, or there's a lot of in the nerd culture, and especially with like the edgy meme stuff, and like there's a lot of like problematic stuff, especially in being white artists in a genre was created by people of color in New York in the 70s. And like, you're always quick to make people look at themselves when they're being ugly. I love that about you.
I felt like I had kind of a responsibility after a while. Well, I think it was something about like I crossed a point where when I was constantly like, I have to keep putting out content quickly, and I have to constantly, you know, make my audience happy, and I have to keep them close, and I have to like kind of let them get away with stuff because it's important to them. I kind of got to some point, and I don't even remember when it was, when I was like, but why do I have to do that? I don't need to cater to fans who are just shamelessly hurtful about things at time. And I feel if I've carved out some little spot for myself and I've managed to amass some small modicum of influence upon the handful of fans in this subgenre, then I'm going to use that modicum of influence for some kind of good, and at least try to give teachable moments when possible.
So the Dark Lord image is a ruse. You actually are bringing light and bringing out the best in people.
Oh, you're ruining my cover.
The secret is out, man. I love your consent song. Like, that is always a highlight of the set.
Thank you. That was an important one for me to write. And then I tried to write a couple of times and it never came out quite right. And then I waited until I got it right. And then I was like, now that's a song I can release. And I thought it was important because, you know, conversations about consent and sexual assault and all of those things I felt like had up until that point been kind of treated by the nerd community as a problem outside, as a problem like, well, yeah, you know, this is bros are like this, and you know, crappy guys are out there doing this, and I, you know, kind of wanted to put them all on my knee and be like, you guys know your nerd conventions are kind of littered with reports of sexual assault all the time, and you got to kind of look at yourselves too.
And you got to like everyone has a friend who has who tries to joke about it.
You're not immune to this. You are, in fact, the thought, the sort of mentality that you feel that this is a problem that goes beyond your circle is an attitude that only perpetuates that kind of violence within your circle.
And it enables it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think one of the great things about nerdcore in the past 5 years is how the demographics have shifted. Yeah. And with like the NPC and like all these new young artists, it really gives me inspiration and makes me happy to see these great people who are it's become more of an eclectic mix of people doing it. Yeah. And I think like, I don't know, I think you're right. I think you're really right. There's this moral imperative that like, as people have been doing it for a while, hopefully the audience that's around will still love what we're doing. And if not, it's more important to say like real stuff to people and not be turned off by not be afraid of turning people off by saying stuff they don't want to hear. Because if you can sprinkle it with comedy or like a great beat or something and put this moral truth out there, that's the external thing to all of this. And I feel like it all has a better purpose. Don't you?
Precisely. I mean, I couldn't have said that better.
I'm glad I got time with you today.
I'm glad too. I'm glad you made the trek over here to hang out with me and the weird cats.
What's in our tour? Like, I just wanted to say last year, the tour you and I did with Mega Ran in front of a lot, that was like such an awesome run.
That tour was so much fun.
Thanks to everyone who came out.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh, that was such a great tour.
Every show was amazing.
Yeah. And it was the shows were great. The crowds were great. The venues were great. It was especially great to spend that much time on the road with the three of you, because we are now members of the older crowd. Like, we've all been around in this scene for a long time.
We're grandparents now.
But we made it beyond, you know, getting bored with the novelty of ourselves and have turned it into something better.
And I hope that like if you all have time, I think it would be fun to do something like that again.
I think we've still got some shirts left, so
we got to sell that merch. Yeah, the tour shirts, right?
I would do that tour again in a heartbeat.
Cool. We hit the East Coast, and the country's so big. So if any of you are listening in the Midwest or West Coast, I don't know. I think we got to talk to Frontalot and Raheem, but yeah, it was just like it was a special time, and I was just like so happy that. I was just so happy that all we had to do was announce the tour, tweet about it. It's like this whole thing in the music industry, so much you have to spend so much money and hire people and do all this extra stuff. And it was just the music and friendship and seeing all these fans, and the new fans who'd never seen us. Like, that was tight as heck.
Yeah, they really did. The audience themselves and us teaming up with one another did the work. The work of so many publicists alone.
No publicists were hired.
We did it. Just the fans were really excited on that trip.
So I'm imagining there's probably some young people listening who are, or young, old, or anyone who are like, have this idea, like one day they might want to make music or do a creative project, and they're like waiting for the right moment, or they're working on something. And you're someone who's manifested this incredible discography and toured so much around and like played for so many people. What advice might you have? And I wanted to just end with this.
I'll tell you the same thing that I've told, especially people who have been fans of nerdcore and they want to get into it. I've so many in-person conversations and so many emails over there, and you've got them too, where somebody writes to you and they say, I am an aspiring nerdcore artist. Can you give me any advice? And I always give them the same 2 pieces of advice. It's always the same. The first one is stop listening to nerdcore hip hop. You can listen to it and be influenced by it, but stop making that your primary influence. Start listening to hip hop. Listen to the classics. Listen to the people who inspired us. Don't just listen to us, because then you're going to be getting, I don't know, like a cover of sorts, like
a clone of a clone.
If you're just inspired by what we do, but you don't know where it came from, then you're gonna kind of telephone game what's good about hip hop and possibly a bad result. So go into your history, listen to great hip hop. You listen to nerdcore too, but really focus on the masters of it. And
so what if you could recommend 3 records? That's to distill it. What 3 would you tell?
Gosh,
what a question.
Enter the 36 Chambers. Let's listen to the Illmatic,
of course.
And I don't know, listen to everything Tribe Called Quest ever released.
Yeah.
There's too many, like, to say, like, if I had to pick 3, listen to 3 Feet High and Rising,
License to Ill, Check Your Head.
There's a
Raising
lot
Hell.
of them, but yeah, go get the good stuff.
Cool.
Okay, so the second part. So the first one is stop just listening to nerdcore, and don't ever say that thing like, I don't like hip hop, but I like what you do. Then don't make hip hop, because you're gonna make something that's gonna be like a bad version of what I do, and what I do is just a bad version of hip hop. So that's the first one. The second one is, once you figure out a recording program that you can use, or the type of gear that you're going to get to record, and you start learning the kind of basics of multi-track recording with whatever, even if you start with GarageBand, that's fine. It works. Get any software that you can. I would say go and record songs, start like learning how to record songs, and don't release any of them until you've recorded 20. And start with your 21st song. Because I think that there has been, too many people that are like, I'm interested by this community that I found online, and everybody can like makes their music on their own. You can all do it at home now. But and because social media has made it like almost compulsive for us to share everything at every moment all the time, that I see a lot of people tagging me in posts when they like just got their first USB mic and just learned GarageBand, and they recorded their first song and they put it out there to share. And I'm like, don't do that. You have to, like, if you were an athlete, you wouldn't work out once and then jump into the game. Yeah. You know, go out there and work a lot and make a bunch of mistakes and wait until you have created a bunch of songs and then start putting them out.
That's very good advice. And I think something I've noticed you've done differently is that you've done a lot of videos over the years. Since the beginning, you were doing these cool, interesting videos. Yeah,
not as many as I think I would like. I've done a few. I'd like to do some more videos, but
I've done 13 years of worth, huh?
Yeah, I've got a few things out there. Yeah. I'd like to do more video stuff, but it's always like so time consuming
and expensive,
and I have to leave my house.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, Revelation 21:7, the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and end. And we accept this holy blessing, let us prep for Armageddon. I'm the Father, shepherding my children into heaven. Yes, I started with the vision, then came the rest. I'm like a more charismatic David Koresh. You'll meet others here like you, lost but they got found, locked down upon a Montana compound. Let the heretics march in the streets. We'll be sovereign, self-governed, armed to the teeth. And when the judgment comes down and takes the heathens, we'll be standing righteous at the gates of Eden. And then, before the choir, hearken the creed. I said, every forest fire starts with a seed. Amen. Now take the blade and carve your sin in your skin. Wash away, let your atonement begin. It's like pride, wrath, envy, lust, sloth, greed, gluttony. Trust that when they learn that it's too late, they'll come for us breaking. But God will not let them take me.
We won't listen to their crying. They have their chance to see the light.
All of this I saw in ashes and frozen. For all of this I didn't ask, I was chosen.
Handing out no pardons, 'cause the world is gonna end tonight.
Something is coming, you can feel it, can't you? That's the reckoning, the angels have been screaming at you. The signs you haven't seen have shown us that it started. Your kind has brought depravity, the locusts in our garden. Hardened skeptics will say I'm insane and call us a cult. Their own homes in disarray, they'll scoff and insult, but we will exult, for these are tests we must face. I've lost brothers and sons, more than once I've lost faith. But God spoke to me, a nobody from nowhere with nothing. He taketh the child, warned us that sinners are hunting, that they will come for our weapons, that they will come with a rope, that they will come for our freedom, but they will never take hope. And I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, a cleansing by fire, entire world torn asunder, under sirens and wolves and Baptists called in for curfew. We'll be reborn into virtue. It's like chastity, cherish, diligence, patience, temperance, humility, kind statements will be reiterated as the ground begins shaking, that God will not let them take me.
We won't listen to their screaming. They had their chance to do what's right.
The fallen crimson sky will crash in the ocean. For all of this I didn't ask, I was chosen.
Begging for forgiveness, 'cause the world is gonna end tonight.
How sweet the sound of my father's voice made him move up north to Montana by choice. An English professor with tenure denied because I taught Huck Finn against a stark racial divide. When a student complained, I was fired for a quote. Taken out of context, faculty took a vote. And I was out on the street with a worthless degree. That's when I read about this place of unity and peace, where I could finally see bliss existing past the veil. I left a world of phonies holding confidence at sail. How could I be a teacher when the past had been rewritten? That's when I saw a statue in the moonlight, I was smitten. Because what if he's right? Doesn't that make you think? Everyone's a little crazy and the world's on the brink of destruction and flames, but Gatsby's glad that I'm here. Eden's gate opened up, healing me and my fears no more.
War, famine, pestilence, death, the martyrs, the trumpet, the cataclysmic events. And when it's just us left, you'll know that I wasn't faking, 'cause God will not even take me.
We won't listen to your begging. You had your chance to stand and fight.
Where once were 7 seals, the last of them's broken. For all of this I didn't ask, I was chosen.
Spend your days in darkness.